we'll wait for Gabriela because she's still having a bit of technical difficulties.
Okay.
So yeah, we should be live now. Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us on this Friday evening for some of us, afternoon for some of us. Dan sends his regards. He couldn't join today, but it would have been like 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. in the morning for him. So, but thanks for those of you that have been waiting for the live stream of the Microsoft Excel World Championship finals. The final round was live the past weekend. We saw the quarterfinals, the semifinals, and the finals matches, and it was the most exciting. I wanted to say probably the most exciting, but I think it was the most exciting live broadcast of Excel as esports that I've ever seen. I know, Dim, you also commented on it on one of your posts, and you said, I don't know what you said exactly, but the scores between Brittany and Andrew in the semifinals were absolutely crazy.
Yeah, I think it switched, like the lead switched 9 times I counted, and like 6 of those were in the last minute and a half. It was pretty wild. I'm very curious to hear how you actually experienced that, Brittany.
I had no idea that it was happening at the time, but I was getting texts. I was like, I don't know. But I was putting in wrong answers and fixing them, so I was going back and forth. I didn't even realize I was that close to Andrew. I thought I was much further behind the whole time.
Yeah, it was very exciting, and it was absolutely crazy in the quarterfinals as well. You had a perfect score and you finished really early. I actually watched the live stream this afternoon on the train back from the office. And it was absolutely crazy to see what actually happened in the end. And Max from the FMWC team wanted me to ask you what happened to that last bonus question on the semi-final rounds, because he said it was unfinished or unfinished until the end or something, and you were 5 points behind the champion in the end, Andrew. So it might have been different if it wasn't for that question. Do you remember?
Well, I remember that the bonus question I had a problem with was the first one. So I actually went back that night and I was looking at it and realized I hadn't translated my answer. I thought I got a nonsensical answer and didn't translate it to the card because I'd gone there first. I think by the end, I don't recall having time or thinking I had time to even approach that last bonus question. But I know that the first one would have made all the difference. I went there first. And I had it.
Been the first one.
And I didn't translate it and put it in. So I was very angry at myself when I reworked the problem that night.
Yeah, no, I mean, you really surprised us. And I mean, I haven't heard Oz shout like that in a live broadcast in a long time.
All my friends were talking about him commentating.
Yeah, it was great. Maybe, sorry, we just started chatting, but maybe introduce yourself, because this is the first time you've joined us for the live stream. Maybe just quickly tell us about yourself, Brittany.
Yeah, so I'm Brittany Deaton. First time, trying out this competition. I had seen it as someone had shared something on Facebook one time, going, "Oh, they got Excel on ESPN." I said, "Oh, that looks fun. I might give that a try." By day, I'm an actuary and work heavily within the modernization space at my company within finance, but I've always had a passion for the different tools and always enjoyed and very heavily used Excel, especially early on when I started off in my valuation days. So, but yeah, the actuarial background I think has helped here. There's lots of Excel time.
Yeah, I must say I've seen it's mostly accountants and actuaries in this competition. And some wearing multiple hats like you, Dim, with a computer sciences degree, and I don't know what other degrees you have, but it is quite interesting. I think it's a mix of actuarial skills, financial skills. Well, the actuarial skills comes in with especially difficult problem solving, and then computer science in a lot of cases, because we saw in the semifinals we saw some VBA being pulled there as well. So there the computer science came out. So on the screen we basically have the final 8 who participated. It was Andrew and I, Kenneth Wang, Michael Jarman, Michael Clark, Brittany Deaton, Joseph Palasok, Michael Holmes, and Matthew Freed. I think it's freed. And then, sorry, I see Gabriela's joined. Just want to admit her. So yeah, we saw very interesting cases. We saw Brittany knocking out Joseph in the quarterfinals. We saw Andrew knocking out Kenneth Wang in the quarterfinals. Michael Jarman went through against Michael Clark, and then Matthew went through against Michael Holmes. And in the end, the scores looked like this. That was the best picture I could find. But essentially, the game we spoke of, Andrew, against Brittany in the semi-finals was decided by 5 points. Pretty much one of the most difficult cases in this competition so far. That was 500 by Tim Hing, if I'm not mistaken. And then we saw Andrew actually getting a perfect score in the final round, which was amazing. Gabriela, I see you've joined us. Welcome. And sorry, I know that you had some technical difficulties. Apologies for that. But maybe just introduce yourself. Sorry, you just muted still. Apologies.
Yeah, now
There
can
we
you
go.
hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, at last. Okay, so sorry. I have a lot of technical difficulties today. So who am I? I work in PwC in a financial modeling team. So Excel is like everything I do on daily basis. I'm like I feel like I'm a little bit of a dinosaur in all of these competitions with starting with model of, I don't know, it was in 2013 or something like this. So I've been taking part in the competitions like this for the last 10 years.
No disparaging of the old timers, please, Gabriela.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
Gabriela, I thought you were going to say you feel like a dinosaur because at PwC we're still on the semi-annual channel and we don't have any of these cool new functions. And
oh yeah, that's another. Yeah, I feel like a dinosaur living in some past era. Yeah.
Gabriela and I were having a chat earlier in the week, both at PwC, and we were saying, we've got to make a plan because, I intentionally am starting to do these competitions on my personal computer at home because I'm on the monthly channel and I've got the new functions. And these days, it's not like you're on Excel from 3 years ago that you're now behind. Whereas, I'd say like 3 or 4 years ago, it was still okay to be on Excel 2007. But a lot of people were still okay. These days, if you're not on the monthly channel, you're like genuinely missing out on some serious stuff.
Yeah. I mean, when text split and text before and text after actually released to the monthly channel, I was so excited. But it's like I'm one of the only people at the company that knows about it. On my personal laptop, I'm on the Insiders channel, and that's super exciting because every time something drops, I can taste it immediately. So yeah, good to see that there's others like me that get excited about Excel. Yeah, thanks for joining me on this live broadcast. It's been a lot of fun watching all these games and watching all of you compete. And it's good to have some new faces on the feed as well. I was actually chatting to Jason. We said maybe we should make this a more regular thing with the FNWC competition and with all the esports events that's on the way. And I know there's more esports coming in the next year. So I think we're going to have a lot more cases to talk about. But let's maybe get into the cases. The cases from the past weekend. For the quarterfinals, we had elections are coming from Andrew Grigolonovich. He's also the founder and CEO and the head of the case design team. He's been really busy and he's been really creative with all these cases. And I must say, this case to me was actually, when I did it, it was actually one of the easiest ones. It's one of the only ones where I could get a full score in under 30 minutes. But it's just because I knew about the find and replace by format, and I know that was one of the biggest topics in the live discussion. A lot of the guys actually jumped into VBA, and it was difficult. And they were talking about I think it was John from Excel Campus. who actually spoke about how difficult it is to like take a gradient or a shading on a cell and relay that back into VBA code. And I know that a lot of the guys were sitting in the watch windows trying to see what is changing as I'm changing the cells. In the end, luckily I've watched a lot of DIMS videos, so I knew about the find and replace function. But yeah, that was essentially a fictional country where they wanted to change the political system. When we got into the semi-final rounds, we could see the Tim Hengs 500. That was, I think, one of the most difficult, if not the most difficult cases in the competition so far. And that was a card game, and apparently a very familiar game to the Australians out there, but not to a lot of us. I don't know if any of you guys have seen the game before or have heard of it, but it was quite interesting. And then the final question was the Super Grandmaster, which was a chess-based game, but it was chess on 1,000 by 1,000 game board, essentially, which was one of the most interesting cases that I've seen so far, and yeah, very interesting to attempt. So I think, Brittany, if you want to maybe kick us off, I don't know if you want to share your screen, but maybe talk us through what your attempt looked like on the first case, which was essentially the elections are coming case by Andrew, because I saw that you were moving around a lot, but maybe talk us through it and your strategy.
Yep, sounds good. So I have shared my screen, so I've got a few things I had pulled up. I'd say in general, I agree. This case did come across as a little simpler to me. At least I was able to understand the prompt right up front, so it did make it a lot easier. In general, it was all about trying to take different summations and look at the different parties and figure out, who would be the winner, who got the most votes. I think when I kind of came to the strategy, I recognized that, there were, I think right off the bat, I saw those last couple of questions with the colors. And thankfully, I'd also watched some of those videos from Diarmuid from before, so I think I knew about this format, find and replace. And so immediately my mind went there. I was like, okay, I know when things get going, I'll be able to run through that pretty simply. And I'd say the other thing that really popped out immediately was the last question and how it was basically a string of all of the votes. And immediately I recognized that was going to be difficult, because when you look at the different parties that we've got, some of them have the 2-digit codes and some have the single-digit codes. So I thought that would definitely be the trickiest part for me. So my strategy was kind of going in and trying to figure out, how do I go through the questions? How do I hit the bonus questions soon enough, knowing that those would probably be taken out from under me if I didn't get to them quickly. So I think I had started right off with the bonus question number 1, which is looking at, what was the highest score that you can get on this voting system 2. So voting system, or level 1, was really just counting up votes. Level 2, we started counting up votes and then looking at, if you add a point for each row or each vote in order that also had the same vote as the prior person, you start getting more points. So it had this example of, if you've got 3 voters in a row, then you get 1 vote for the first person, 2 votes for that second person, and 3 for the third. So I knew that when looking at that bonus question, trying to figure out what the maximum here would be if, everybody voted for the same one, which is just the summation from 1 to 100. So you actually do this without any formulas at all, just looking at the sum in the bottom corner being 50-50. So I was able to get that right off the bat and pull that in. Otherwise, I knew, for me, level 2 seemed a little trickier, so I skipped it and didn't attempt to solve it right up front. And skipped right over and started looking at section 3. And so section 3 started getting into looking at the payment scheme and how they're looking to see, okay, on average, we're expecting to be fully correct would be 20 votes for each party. So the payment's going to be tied to how far away each party is from that. So I knew that could be done through some simple countings. And then I knew I needed to hit, of course, this find and replace. So I took all that in and was kind of looking at that, had solved the bonus question number 1, and then that's when I started getting into modeling. And I think the first thing off the bat that I did was I got rid of those 2-digit codes. So I actually created a second copy of the spreadsheet and did a find and replace and got rid of all my BWs and replaced them with A, and all my YBs and replaced it with C. So all of a sudden I had a single code that was going to be consistent across the board. I knew that would come in handy for level 5. Hadn't given much thought as to if that would really solve or make it easier for the prior ones, but wanted to get that out of the way right away. And then I just start kind of going through them otherwise in order, but skipping that question number 1. So, or question number 2. So question number 1 was fairly simple, kind of looking at, hey, you know, how many votes for purple are there? So that was a pretty simple count if function. So hit that right away. Skipped number 2, like I said, went over to 3, and 3 was just, like I said, it's looking at the votes for each party. So I did that off to the side, and you can add up and look at, you know, how many votes off of 20 are they getting. So this count if function is just looking at, you know, for party B, how many did they get? And then subtract that from 20 and take the absolute value. So that tells me how many votes off from that 20 they are. And then the payment scheme was just, you know, taking that 10,000 for each of the votes that were off and multiplying or taking that out of the total payment. And so that gave me, you know, across the board, all the payments there, which also enabled me to solve bonus question number 2, which was just, hey, what's the minimum across all of the level 3 scenarios? And I think from there, I said, okay, I'm gonna go try and solve 4 and 5 now using my fun find and replace by format. So I'd create a separate tab and just did a find and replace using that that feature to go and change the format and choose the format from cell. You can go in and just do it for each of the 5 and replace and add the letter. And so that just cycled through and did it for everything. And then once I had the codes in there, I could just do a simple, you know, count if function, just like I'd done for that question number 3 as part of that. And then similar. Yep.
Sorry. So yeah, like I said, if you knew about the find and replace by cell format, that question was relatively easy. But that was where I think we saw 2 or 3 guys in the quarterfinals actually jumping into VBA in that case, trying to solve this with VBA, and it was really difficult. I think if you wanted to solve it with VBA, if it was simple colors and not gradients, it would have been much simpler. But I know that John Akampora said he tried solving question number 5 with VBA because he was comfortable with it. But the find and replace is definitely a much simpler solution. And it was clever. It was clever that you actually went for the replacements of the BWs and the BWs and the YBs. Yeah. I actually went and I changed everything to numbers. So I changed all the BWs firstly to 1, for instance, or 2, and all the YBs to another number, to a 3 or something. And then I changed everything across the board. So I was just left with numbers, and I could do a match or an XLOOKUP back to the sequence in the front. So I could actually go back and do all 5 questions with the same number strategy. So in a lot of cases, with these cases, you just need to solve for sorting out the data first, and then the rest comes naturally. So
yeah, definitely agree. So glad I didn't have to jump into VBA. Would not have had time for that. I'm not as comfortable in that. So I'm really glad I had that trick up my sleeve to do the find and replace. Because it definitely made it a lot simpler. And either going to a number or a code I could see as making it very possible to, especially for that next one. And that's really where, like, my question 5 ended up taking a very similar format, obviously not with find and replace, but I just had to parse out the string, and then I could add up the votes in the same way. And I will say for the string itself, you know, being that I knew that each one would only be 1 character, that became just a mid formula. And I think it's another trick that I picked up along the way of doing a mid on the text, but then having this sequence so that it just kind of goes through the number of characters it sees. In this case, it should be 1,000, but just goes through each one and says, okay, we'll take the first character, start with the first character, take 1 character, start the second character, take 1 character. And so it can split that all up. And that became very simple. So if you have that trick up your sleeve too, then that can make this type of problem really easy.
definitely. And I was actually thinking about in that case, if you didn't know the mid-sequence trick, you could have actually replaced all of the characters with a or one and a comma, and then use a text split afterwards if you wanted to. So there's various ways of doing that. But I saw that you jumped into the mid-sequence length quickly, and then I think you also wrapped it in a transpose initially, if I remember correctly. But yeah, it's good to have
Probably
these.
because I forgot this. If you don't do that, it puts it the wrong direction.
Yeah,
so
so it went rows instead of columns. Yeah.
Yes, I think I fixed that up when I cleaned with the version. So either way, it gets you there.
Yeah.
And I just sat in the moment and just quickly threw the transpose around it rather than figure out why it was coming out vertical instead of horizontal.
I was curious, with a lot of these features that you used in your training, how did you prepare for this? Because you don't have all the experience that a Dim and a Gabriela, for instance, have. How did you prepare for this? How did you prepare to actually be prepared for all these cases?
I think I bought all the historic cases, got that whole package so I could play around with them, and just started working through them in bits and pieces. And then I've watched a number of the videos online trying to pick up on different tips. So I think one of the first things that I saw was probably from last year or prior year. I think Dim, you'd done some data tables, and I said, "What the heck is that?" And so I was I didn't even know what it was called. So I'm like Google searching, trying to figure out how to do this thing. And finally, once I got it, I was like, "Oh, that's amazing!" And so I started using that all the time. And I picked up a few other things there too. So yeah. It's all his fault for all the videos he's put up in the past.
Yeah, I must say I've also referred to a lot of Dim's videos for a lot of the things that I've applied, or a lot of the techniques that I've applied. I think Dim, you've created a monster. You've actually given away all your tips, perhaps, or maybe not all of them. I still see some new tips coming through in every single next video that you release. But
yeah, there's always more to learn.
That is true. That is true.
Yeah, it was definitely very helpful because I learned like the data tables from there. Dynamic arrays popped up. I think in the last, I think it was the last round, I used the Unicode or Unichar formulas, which I didn't know were a thing before one of those videos too. Pretty sure I'd never really touched XLOOKUP until this competition too. And I finally was like, probably need to learn that one. It's fully index match, and I can still do a lot with index match, but XLOOKUP is a little quicker. It really is.
It is a lot quicker.
I refuse to use a VLOOKUP though. We'll not do that. And the sequence formula, that's been really cool too.
Yeah, those have changed my life as well. I remember John in the live feed actually was talking about using VLOOKUP because it's muscle memory. But as soon as you sort of get comfortable with a formula like XLOOKUP, the only time I've gone back to a VLOOKUP was where I wanted to use an index column, specific like a number. And use that like as a reference, so like a number at the top as a column reference, for instance. But other than that, I use XLOOKUP all the time.
Yeah, so it's a great little handy formula.
Funny enough, I know, Dim, I think you mentioned previously that the VLOOKUP in a speed run can actually be faster because you only have to refer to the range once if you just put in column 2 kind of thing. If you know that, if you know it's column 2, then it's quick.
Yeah, as much as it's considered blasphemous to say that these days, I still use VLOOKUP sometimes. Usually only if it's like, if I'm kind of pulling something from a reference table and then I'm going to hard code it, like looking up a person into their region or division or something like that. Like you only have to go to the other file once. I still think there's a place for VLOOKUP.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. Anything else that you guys want to share from case number 1?
I just have to say, I'm kind of impressed at how clean your workbook is, because I thought I had done this case pretty fast when I was testing it, and then like you and Joseph and Andrew and maybe someone else as well were like significantly faster even than me, and I was kind of assuming that your workbook would at least look like a train wreck, but it actually looks very well presented.
My live one looks a little messier, but the clean workbook thing's been kind of a passion of mine. working with a lot of workbooks, a lot of actuarial workbooks throughout the years, it's really easy to make a messy and I lose track of what's happening. I think even what I was noticing in some of the practicing for this was that I can get this stuff working, but the more complex problems, if I wasn't keeping things organized, I couldn't troubleshoot. So it's just kind of become second nature, both from having done that through my job and doing that all the time, and that being a passion of mine, plus also realizing that, yeah, to me, it's worth a little extra time to try to put things in an organized way. Just how my mind works. But yeah.
It's funny. I mean, I try to do that when I'm kind of doing real work. I keep going over and back on whether it's actually worth doing under, like, you know, under competition time pressure. I can never decide. It's like, you know, I spend too much time formatting and then I'm kicking myself that I could have saved a few minutes, and then the next time I'm very loose with it and then I can't find what I'm looking for, and I never know what the right answer is.
I try to keep it minimal, but I knew I would need at least some level of it.
Yeah,
and this one I did clean up a little bit because I had time.
Yeah, I must say I also like I've seen that you also jump into another sheet, Brittany, and then you copy across the example 1 or example 2, 3, and then I saw that you do the X lookup of the whole column and the whole reference column, and yeah, like that.
Yeah, I think I did that here for number 2 and used my handy dandy data table.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is one I only started recently doing. I was like, oh yeah, I can do the X lookup with the whole set of columns.
And I do that as well, because that means, like, if my next section's data is in the same format, I can just copy the sheet across, name it number 4, number 3, or whatever, and just change my example reference, and everything that I've prepared is already there. So especially in the next case, that is definitely the case, because it's very similar. Every single section is very similar. So in the interest of time, let's maybe jump into the next case. Gabriela, you want to just lead us on that?
Okay.
Are you comfortable?
Yeah, I will share the screen. Okay, you should see my screen already. So the case here. Okay, the case here. The instructions, they were, oh my god, I could not understand like the rules of the I was like yeah, I couldn't understand the rules of the game for a very long time, so I was making a lot of mistakes. I don't know if it was your experience also, but I was making a lot of mistakes with understanding what is the
I think that was definitely one of the things that I struggled with as well. As soon as you're not comfortable with the rules of the game, and you haven't seen it before, if it's brand new, I mean, if it's something like blackjack, a lot of people know how blackjack works, right? So because it's so familiar, you sort of feel comfortable, but sometimes that can bite you as well, because then you tend not to read the question properly and you miss something small. But in this case, it was something completely new. And if you're not a quick reader and you're not a fast preparer in this case, this would have bitten you, because there's a lot of preparation up front that you needed to do in order to prepare for the trump cards, to prepare for the sequence of how the cards are dealt. So there were a lot of challenges in this case. And if you did your preparation up front well, you could quickly score a lot of points in this. But if your preparation was lacking, or you didn't prepare for all 5 questions, you definitely wouldn't have been able to finish this in half an hour's time. So I agree, Gabriela.
Yeah, so I will be like able to guide you through half of the case, because then I got lost in the instructions. But let's start. So the rules were here that we have this 43 cards deck, and we are dealing it the cards that we will have here in the examples in a specific way. So the first thing I did as this preparation was somewhere here in the right. This is for me, it's surprising that I always in these live cases I always work in the same sheet as where the inputs are. I think I'm the only person, and I don't do it on those offline stages and during or in work. but it's just, I don't know why I'm doing it. I think I'm thinking about the people that are watching it and that they want to follow the formulas and they don't want to jump between the sheets. But okay, enough topic. So I prepared this dealing here. So there's the card number and it's 1 to 43, and it's just which player is getting which card. I did not bother to come up with any formula here. It's just a manual input. So it's player 1 to 3, and this is this table, that's the card that is left on the table. So this one was one preparation, and another preparation was which bet is big and small. I already gave it range name so that I quickly can reference it, and what is the value of the cards, and some other inputs here. Yeah, and here I used a number, but then I had to change it into a text so that it gets like I don't remember, but in some of the functions when I was like extracting only one value from this whole string, it could not recognize numbers, so I had to come back here and change it into a text format. So this was the preparation here. And what else? There is this preparation to see. So there is that which is the other color of this color. So for spades, what is the other black color? It's the clubs, and for clubs it's spades, and so on. So there is another like suits 1 and suits 2. So because there was somewhere this rule that as you can see, there are a lot of rules in this case. So yes, one of the rules was something about the colors. I think it was about the
jack of the opposing, well, of the same color, but the same color the other suit.
Mm-hmm.
So the jack is also a high trump card for that suit.
Yeah,
was the other rule.
Yeah, that was the rule that I could not get because I thought it's like the optional suit of the same, but never mind. First, we have the first case was easy because it was okay. So we had to simulate what was the hand of player 4 and how many spades he had. So I prepared this. There's this input that it's player 4 and what suit we are looking for. It's suit, yes. I'm not sure if it's in English if I'm using the correct word. Okay, yeah. So what suit we are looking for? So what I did here was just use this vector here that is showing that player 1 is getting the first free cards and so on. The player 2 is getting second free cards and so on. So there is just this if that is spilling to the right to get this whole hand, and concat that is like bringing it all into one sow. And what did I do here? Yeah, and here I used this this like a trick to extract how many times the given character is in a string. So I'm getting the length of, maybe I will take this function there so we can see what is happening here. I'm taking the length of the whole string, so it will be I don't know if an additional window will be visible. So it's 21, and when we substitute the spades with a blank, then we will get the the length without the spades. So that's it, 17. So there must be 4 spades inside. So this was the first one.
Sorry, if I can add there. When I did this, I actually did this before watching the live feed and before watching Dim's version. And I did it the setup of the numbers of cards being dealt. I did in a very similar fashion. But then when it came to splitting them out per player, I actually used the filter function, and that could lay out the cards for me neatly in a dynamic array. And what was nice about that is I could just refer to the dynamic array quickly every time. and I could actually give the dynamic arrays names, and I could say that's player 4 cards, and then I could do I actually did a wildcard lookup for the spade character, and I saw that Dim also did it in a similar way with the wildcard count if. So that length trick of yours is a very powerful trick, but these days there's actually much easier ways of counting like that with the wildcard and the dynamic arrays. But your method is a very good it's a very good modeling method, and I've seen it many times as well.
Yeah, it's a trick that I learned, 10 years ago. So it's an old trick. So I guess that there are many better options to do it, but it's just but I just use it all the time.
If it works and you're comfortable with it, that's what's important.
And it's a great trick to know when you're working with a string of text and you're trying to find instances in a string of text. And Renier, I guess I agree. If you have the luxury of having the cards laid out in separate cells, then the filter to get that was great. But often in the sort of modeling context, you find a string of text and you want to find out how many instances of a particular character there are. And this is a great trick to know. So one of the things I love about talking about this stuff is you just see how different people approach the same, same problem in such different ways, and you get the same answer. And Gabriela would have written this formula in like a second, I'm sure, because she's done it a million times.
Exactly. And
by the way, I used the same trick for level 5 of the case you showed, Brittany, to chopping off. And you can actually, if you divide by the length of what you're taking out, then you can actually use it to figure out how many times something that's more than one character comes out as well. So like you can figure out how many YBs are in the string if you use that lens substitute trick and then just divide by 2. So that's what I did to do. I tried it a different way and then it didn't work. And then I went back to using lens substitute to do that level 5. It's a great trick.
That's excellent. Yeah, it's great.
Okay, so that was the first question. Then there was the second question. I have to ungroup it. Oh, sorry. Yeah, so there was again that there's this player 2, and we are checking how many big trumps does this player number 2 have if the clubs is the trump. So again, it's like very similar setup. So there's again this player and the suit, and here is this like searching for the reverse, the other suit in the same color for the purpose of jacks. And what do I have here? There are 3 conditions here. Yeah. So what I'm doing here, it's like developing the function that we had there, but it's getting longer and longer. Yeah, I'm checking if the bet here is big or small. So it's just an X lookup and some if condition for jack. Then there is subtracting the suit and extracting the value of the card. So I have these 3 vectors for player number 2, and I'm doing some countifs on this. So yeah, probably it's not very elegant. I guess you had some better ideas here. I would love to hear them.
Well, yeah, if it works, it works. I also used the countif, but I essentially built a little lookup table for the big trumps, and actually used a switch function, which in the end I wasn't impressed with my switch function between the suit switches, because it's much faster to just build a little lookup table, and I saw that's what Dim did, and I saw that's what you also did, Gabriela. So maybe could I just quickly share my screen? I just want to show what I did on that level. So on that specific level, I did it multiple ways. I firstly did a count A on a filter where it's not a number, and then I realized I'm not considering all the trumps because I wanted to remove all the stuff that's not a number. And then I went back and I read the rules again, and I eventually just built a little lookup table for my big trumps, and I just combined this back with a switch function. So this was just a sort of transposed X lookup, bringing back all my cards. These are just the sort of how they were dealt. This was my filter function, bringing back each one of the players' decks, and essentially we were looking for player 2's big trumps, and I essentially just did a count if of the big trumps for that player, and then just did a data table to solve that. So it was actually a simple problem to solve, but again, needs some setup. But what was nice about this problem was I could copy this setup across for every single level, and I would have had the basic setup done already. And I saw that's what you also did.
Yeah, that's similar to my approach too. Is I tried to start off problem 1 with dealing out the cards because I knew I'd need that for the rest of them. So for each of mine, I just kind of that copy of the tab where it had the cards dealt out, and then if you did the different types of lookups. I think in counting up those trumps, in that case, I did like a sum of an is number match formula type of combination. So just trying to see, hey, I had a similar lookup table saying, hey, is this a match for any of the cards? And if so, give me a 1 and add them up.
I also did the is number match. Just very curiously, did anybody try and do a formula-based approach to figure out how the cards are dealt, or? Because I also just manually did 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 2, 3, 3, 3.
So I did not do it at the time. I just kind of did it the same as you did. But as I was, so I originally kind of tested the sort of harder version of this question before it got sort of diluted a little bit. So I like completely failed to get it finished. Then I decided I'd kind of come back and look at it fresh for a video. So when I was doing that one, I did contemplate basically if you use sequence, you can get it to list out like 1, 2, 3, then in the next row 4, 5, 6, and then the next row 7, 8, 9. So you can use basically 3 sequences to list out, the block of the first 12 cards, and then the block of the middle 16 cards, and then the block of the last 12 cards. So you could kind of lay out the numbers that way in kind of 3 quick formulas, but it's not significantly faster than just typing them out.
Yeah, and then you could perhaps use an H stack or a V stack with a 2 col or a 2 row if you wanted to, but figuring that out might take more time than just typing it out.
I tried typing it out in the live case, and I kept typing out the wrong numbers. I think I seriously rewrote them like 3 times just under the pressure. I did play around with a formulaic version after the fact too. I actually have a VLOOKUP incorporated there, funny enough, because I was trying to do like what's the minimum number of the card for the next player. And
that's sensible. Actually, I hadn't thought about doing it that way.
Don't think it was quicker given there's only 43 cards in it, but
yeah, I don't think there's much quicker than just, I mean, like I did kind of 1, 1, 1, and then for the next 9, I did like equals 3 before plus 1. So there's like a little tiny bit of formula, but it's
my problem was I did
just
1, 1, 1, 1, 1, and kept doing that. Did 5 cards. I don't know why I couldn't count properly.
I think the benefit of doing it manually or dummy, I mean, even with a slight efficiency of adding 1 and then sort of manually changing that as you went along, was in this case, because the rules of the game is that there's always 43 cards, so it's the same order across all of the examples. You just needed that order of dealing once, and then you could use it throughout. It wasn't something that was going to change. And in some of the other cases that we've seen, level 1 has got 10 cards that are dealt, and then level 2's got 20 cards, and then level 3's got 50 cards. So this one was 43 cards the whole way down. So if you just typed it in once, to me it felt like it was way easier to do that and then just move on with life and sort of have my soul degrade a little bit inside because I've hard coded stuff. But it was just better on the day, I think.
Apologies, Gabriela. You can continue. You can share the screen again if you want.
Yes, it was great to hear your thoughts. So okay, so this was this case. And then no, it's at the level 3 already that I stuck on. So because I really did not understand what's happening in the instructions. So so I can guide you through the bonus through 2 bonus questions. But here, if after my 2 bonus questions you have something better to show, then you're welcome. So I'm just jumping here to the top. Because here are like easy instructions. The most common card dealt for player 1 in level 1. To do it, I just used the infrastructure like that I had here. So I typed here 1 to get his hands, and then did something here on the right. So I like made a countif of the same range as you can see. So it gives me how many times this value is in all of these values, and then I just took a max and did. Yeah, I guess I did it manually. I just saw that it's 6 here, so I already knew that what card is it. That it's 4 of the diamonds. Of course, if it was for more than 1 question, then I would use some unique or something like this and make some more sophisticated formula. But it was only for 1 question, and I found it quite funny to use this countif of the same range in the same range.
The countif of the same range again is a great sort of quick solution here, because it doesn't matter if you get the 6 of the same card, because it's the same card. Yeah, so if it comes up 6 times, it's fine. So that's actually really clever. I try to figure out what the unique of the cards were, and then figure out how many ones. But this was just way quick. So that's really cool.
If I had this, I don't know what it's called, to row or to call a function like this, then it would be, maybe unique would be equally quick, because if I understand how this formula works, I could just transfer this array into a vector and then use it as a unique on it. But I don't have such fancy functions, so I only have this countif here.
Yeah, although it's funny, I used unique and to-call to do this one, but like to Jason's point, I actually think your way is faster if I was just kind of looking at it fresh. It takes up more space, but I think you get to the answer like faster and with fewer kind of characters and complications. I like it.
Agreed.
Yeah, as long as you know to translate at the end. That was my problem. I did the countif. I got a bunch of 6s and thought, oh, that's not right. I should get 1 max. Yeah, that was my problem. I was supposed to get multiple 6s.
Yeah, you're supposed to get 6, 6, 6. 6
yes.
At least.
And instead, I thought that's wrong, and I moved on.
Yeah, but I guess you were under the stress, and I was just doing it on the couch. So,
Brittany, was that the question? Was that what would have wanted for you?
Yes, because I went straight here. Basically, I started the problem and immediately said I can kind of do 1 and bonus 1 together by dealing out the cards. So I had set up where I dealt out the cards. I threw a data table on it and very quickly got the cards that existed for all of the 10 examples. And then I did the countif things. I had that right off the bat. It was the very first thing I solved. It was well in advance of Andrew even attempting it. But I got that and I said, I don't have time to troubleshoot this. I need to move on. Otherwise, I'm gonna have time for everything else because this is really complicated. Yeah. That's
crazy. So the semi-final was decided on 5 points, and that could have made the difference. That could have made you kick out the champion.
He wouldn't have gotten the bonus because I would have gotten it first.
That's crazy. But yeah, I mean, in a live scenario, that is exactly what makes this competition so challenging, because looking at these questions fresh, when you're not under time pressure and you're comfortable and you're not stressed, it's a much different scenario than doing it under time pressure and even live with like thousands of people watching you. I can't even imagine what that stress is like. But I always do stupid things, and afterwards I'm like, I'm so clever, I'm so good. But when I'm in the live scenario, no ways I can do that. I see Bo has shared with us a formula. He figured out a formula in the live stream chat for the sequence of cards being dealt. So there's a one solution formula, and that's typically Bo. Thanks, Bo, for that. Yeah, if you guys want to see someone solving these cases in record time, go watch Excel Wizard or Bo's channel. He really solves these questions in crazy time. So
yeah, I was going to say, like, the thing that people said earlier about finding all kinds of tricks from my channel. Most of the new tricks that I've learned in the last few months have been from watching Bo's channel, because he's a genius.
yeah,
Comes up with very, very neat, clever, surprising solutions to these things.
yeah. Is there anything else that we wanted to discuss or share on question number 2? Gabriela, are you comfortable?
Yeah, okay, so I can hear only this
Sure.
this one bonus question here. There's always one of those bonus questions that can be solved by like using the same logic, and it's usually a concat again. So it's like how many diamonds were in level 4. So I just made a very long, as you can see here, a very long string of all of the of all of the cards that were here, and made again this length of substitutes. So again, the same trick. The only thing was that in the beginning I did not take into consideration the table or the kitty, or how it's called. So I only got a correct answer here because I already knew the answer, and I knew that I was wrong here. So I was probably on the live session, I would probably be here with this 220 or something like this. And because I couldn't only like concat this area. This area here is the level 4 games, but I had to like exclude the based on this vector here. I had to exclude column number 13 and so on. So and then this length and substitute. Yeah. So, and that would be all.
I did exactly the same thing. I thought, bonus number 2 is super easy. 220, that's got to be the answer. And then it did. And obviously for us doing it after the fact, you've got the ticks and the crosses that are telling you you're right or wrong. I mean, if we were doing this live, I would have thought, oh, well, that's a very easy 80 points, done and dusted. And then you sort of look at the live score and you think like, that, can you imagine the stress going through that? Like, why am I not getting the points? What did I do? That's such a simple solution. Yeah. The table card there, the kitty was a sort of a real sort of nasty trick there.
Yeah, and you can easily go down the rabbit hole and go spiral and go spend 5 or 10 more minutes there, and you actually lose out on potential other points. And that's where exam technique comes in. But some guys, I think some guys just pick it up quickly, and others don't. And I guess that's where the big divide comes between the top players and people like me, for instance. So maybe let's get into the final case. Dim, if you could lead us on that. I think this was one of the most interesting cases that I've seen in a long time.
So let's share this one. Yes. All right. So I was just going to show you something very quickly before I jump into this one. Just thinking about what Gabriela said about solving this case on the sheet versus going elsewhere. So this is my kind of cleaned up later version, but when I was kind of originally working through this, as the complexity built up, very much like what Gabriela did, I'd kind of laid out it started off as like one particular player, one particular trump, and I had laid out a kind of set of things that dealt with that. And then I was like, all right, now you need to, apply that to all the different trumps. I was like, all right, so I duplicate that whole area 4 times. And I was like, all right, now you need to apply that to all the players. So I duplicate that whole thing another 4 times. And I kept going out and out and out and out the columns. There's always a bit of a trade-off in these things. Like if you build from the start, then you might miss out on kind of optimizations you could do by kind of solving it for later. But if you try and build the whole thing, then you might just run out of time and get a bust. But so when I came back to look at this one later, I had a solution where, like, I laid out all the players' cards in rows, and I laid out all the different kinds of special cards in columns for each suit. And then with that setup, it was relatively easy to kind of get a grid of, okay, so here's the most that one player is willing to, that, this player for this suit, and kind of work down from there. But yeah, when I was actually going through it originally, my solution didn't look anything like that. It looked like 400 columns wide, all within the same sheet. So I just thought I'd share that little bit of perspective.
What I love about your solution there is the fact that you can actually see it on one screen, and a lot of times with good modeling, you can see the solution on one screen, and you can actually see you can see your error. You can quickly go through your games and you can see if you pick up an error where that occurred. I actually thought that the one where you multiplied by the trumps, I would have actually laid that out transposed. So it was actually interesting to me that you built horizontally, and then you went vertically, and then you went horizontally again, or then you went into matrices, which was just interesting to see how someone else's mind works, I guess.
I see Dim's just sent a thing in the chat saying his laptop's just died. He's on his way.
Oh, sorry. I thought my connection dropped or something. I thought you guys didn't hear me there.
It's just shocked by your comments.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, while we're waiting for Dim, that this case 500, I think on the day, quite a challenging task to work through, and my mind certainly when I'm approaching cases like this is to say, okay, level 1, build out a solution, and then try and expand on that for level 2, 3, 4, and 5 as you sort of learn the logic of the game or whatever. But this case specifically, I found the benefit of hindsight and knowing that building a solution for level 5 from the start gives you all the other levels really easily, and knowing that level 5 in this context, I appreciate that. I think the original question that was tested was actually more difficult than this. So, but in the context of this case that was given, knowing that you could build a solution for level 5 in the time and then go back and just answer all the others in a flash, the benefit of hindsight here was that was actually a really great way to approach it. Whereas sometimes, sorry, Ricky.
I would say that's exactly what hurt me during the competition, was not thinking far enough ahead, and I don't think I would have been able to get through everything. But I do remember having a lot of difficulties at level 4 because all of a sudden things have been built off of certain players, and I needed to expand it to look at everyone. So I'm like, they're dragging formula references and trying to copy some stuff across, and that was a lot harder than when I went back later, of course, knowing the case, and cleaned up and did one. I was like, I would have built that a lot different if I had really truly thought ahead, but I was spending too much time focusing on the rules during the read-through period and not looking at question 5 and what it was going to entail.
I will say the pendulum swings both ways on that one a little bit, which is, I think more people lose out by not looking ahead and not kind of building something slightly more general. But as someone who always tries to look ahead and always tries to build something, not always, but often tries to build something more general, that has definitely bitten me before, because it's like, all right, so I've spent all this time working on something to solve all 5 levels, but it's not working, and maybe I've misunderstood something in the rules, and I could have racked up a lot of points on the first few levels, but actually I've got nothing so far. I mean, that's how I managed to score, I think, 8 out of 1,000 on one of these esports cases before.
I actually remember that. I think that was last year's competition where that happened. If I think long enough, I would actually tell you which one it was as well. But
it was Excelopolis. I will never forget.
That was a crazy case.
Yeah, that's a swear word in my mind. Excelopolis.
that 8 out of 1,000 was an above median score on that case.
I saw Andrew actually did that in the semifinals. He was really slow to start, and then he started racking up a lot of points. So, but that was clearly preparation that he was going through. All right, so yeah, let's maybe get into the final case.
Yes. All right. I'm gonna actually do it this time. Sorry, my laptop died at a very inconvenient moment there.
No problem.
So, I mean, I started off by looking at the bonus questions just as a tactical thing, but I think in terms of ease of following, I'll do them in level order first, and then circle back to the bonus maybe at the end. So, I mean, just a couple of bits of kind of housekeeping stuff. The first thing I did when I got hold of this case was come in. Sorry, I've got too many columns. Come in here and like name the board, name the range of column labels, name the range of row labels here, and then at some point later I came back and added numbers 1 to 100 next to the columns and call that column label number, just because that it gives you a lot to work with later. And then I also named. I called this pieces and called this points. Just made a lot of the references later easier, so I didn't have to jump around as much. So
sorry, I just wanted to add that I did the same, but I actually in this case made that top part a table, so that it automatically was named, so that I didn't have to go pieces and points. But it's actually simpler if you just name the pieces and points. So thinking back, I wouldn't have made it a table, but just wanted to
make it a table, and then you can use VLOOKUP.
True.
I like to stir the pot in VLOOKUP sometimes. Anyway, so yeah, once you've done the setup, you know, these are kind of funky pieces, but you can treat them just like single text characters. So just, you know, count if board this piece tells you how many of that there are, and then level 2 is just the same thing, and then multiply by the piece value. It's a little bit tricky that the first one was the king, and so the correct answer was 0 points. That threw me off for a second, but then I was like, okay, yeah, that makes sense, and moved on. So that was all good. So then next question was, what's the total point value of pieces located in the following row or column? So in other words, you know, all of column U, for example, is all these pieces here. What are they worth? I don't know if I did it exactly at this moment, but at some point before too long, I set up a new named range below here, which I called board points. And that was just, you know, if it's blank, then 0, otherwise X look up that piece in points. And then once I had that, I just said, if either the row label matches this or the column label matches that. Oh yeah, so this is obviously before I had set up board points, so I could have just put in board points there, but as it was, I did X lookup board pieces points 0. So in other words, look up that piece in the points, and if there's no match, which was the blanks, then give 0. And then just wrap all of that in a sum, and that does those. Level.
I just wanted to add the fact that you did a plus there instead of the OR formula, or the OR function, and we actually spoke about that, Jason and myself, a while ago. I think Jason has perhaps again had a blackout. We in South Africa have what we call load shedding, which is rolling blackouts. So your electricity drops at a specific point in time, and that means the network also goes with it. So Jason might not be back, but we'll see. He's trying to get back. But
it's had bad run of luck on these things.
It is bad, yes. It is terrible. But basically the OR formula that you use there is just applying basic math. So Excel treats the true or a false as a 1 or a 0, and if you add well, it's the computer science logic of adding up a 1 and a 0 makes it an OR, because a 1 and a 0 would be a 1, which is either one of them must be true. And then you can also use multiplication instead of and, which is quite a cool trick, a nifty trick, because the and the OR cannot be used everywhere, and the same logic applies in a filter function. So that's just a very nice technique.
So, I mean, just to kind of quickly explain that, if you, rather than saying, you know, this condition plus this condition, if you wrap it in an OR, what you've got is, you know, one kind of row vector and one column vector of trues and falses. It'll just say, or any of those. If any one of those, which obviously, you know, all of these are some row or column, and so the OR would just collapse everything down to one true. And just one other quick comment is, I think people are somewhat used to the idea that true false equates to 1 0. But it's actually worth knowing that any number that is not 0 is treated as true. which is why you can have this kind of simpler math for or, like the kind of strict mathy way to do it is like 1 minus x times 1 minus y. But this can add up to 1 or 2. I mean, in this case, only one of the conditions will be true, but in some of the ones we'll look at later, more than one of these could be true. But if you say if 2 A or B, then it says 2 is equal to true. Any non-zero number is equal to true. So that's kind of the logic there.
Yeah, good top.
So then level 4 and 6 in this one were interesting. 4 more so. 6 they were a little bit kind of similar, but 4 was really 3 totally separate levels, because, or I don't know, maybe somebody else found there might be ways to kind of generalize it more smartly than I did. If you kind of laid out the sort of vectors of possible moves each one of these could make, you could make a semi-general solution. But the easiest way I found to do this was just to do three separate solutions. So I mean, just to kind of briefly show, the king can capture itself and then anything around it. For level 4, I don't think it's specified, but all the cells that these would be placed on in level 4 were empty. And then you're also placing pieces on squares in level 6, but there you're told if you place it on an occupied square, then it takes that one as well. So for this one, it's just, anything that's, no more than 1 row and no more than 1 column away from the king can be taken. The castle, any straight line vertically or horizontally, the bishop any diagonal, the queen is the 2 of those together, so any vertical or horizontal or diagonal line. The knight, 2 squares in one direction and 1 square in another, so there are 8 different places it can take, and then the pawn can take on either side above it. And we were always playing white, and so we were always moving up the board, so it's just those 2 above it. So for the king, there are neater ways to do this, but to get the number out of this, I just said take the last 3 characters and minus minus. It's just minus minus leaves a number unchanged but breaks of its text. If that throws an error, then try the last 2, and if that throws an error, then take the last 1. And then take the left of this minus the number of characters that there are there, and then you can match that against column label to get a number. And so then the logic I applied was if, and again here we're multiplying now because we've got 4 different conditions and we need them all to be true. So if the column number, if the column number is not more than 1 bigger and not more than 1 smaller, and if the row number is not more than 1 bigger and not more than 1 smaller, then give me the board points, otherwise give me 0. You could also do this one with an offset. So if I saw Andrew doing this on the live stream, so you could say sum of offset indirect board exclamation mark and this here, and then from there you want to offset -1 row, -1 column, and 3 rows and 3 columns your height. Oh, sorry.
So
I'm doing it on board rather than on board points here. So that's why that didn't actually work. But if I did, or I guess if I added another 103 to my row offset or something like that, it would. There's 104. Anyway, you get the idea. Sorry, that starts on 106. So I'd have to add 105. Then it comes out matching. So it didn't. I don't even know what I'm not even looking at what the ref error is there. That's not the way I did it, but you could do it that way, but this one worked fine for me.
I actually did it with the offset as well, but then when I started getting into the diagonally across and the horizontally and stuff, I realized that the offset cannot take sequences, and it started breaking and it just screwed me over, and I gave up on that strategy as well.
Yep. So that's the king. The pawn was relatively simpler. So I just said there's basically two pieces here, taking to the left and taking to the right. So for taking to the left, I said if it's in the first column, then it can't take to the left, so just 0. Otherwise, give me 1 row higher and 1 column to the left. And same if it's in the column furthest to the right, then it can't take anything. Otherwise, give me one row higher and one column further to the right, and just add those two up. And you did need that condition because we had something in the first column and something in the last column deliberately to kind of catch you if you tried to be lazy there. And then for the night, this is a mathematician's trick here. There are other ways to do it, but the way I did it was just the Pythagorean theorem. The squares a knight can take are exactly the ones whose distance away from the knight is the square root of 5, because the only way that you can get that distance on a grid like this is one in one direction and 2 in the other direction. And so I just said if the column number I'm in here minus the column number squared plus the row number I'm in minus the row number squared is equal to 5, then give me board points, otherwise give me 0. So that's very
clever. Did not do anything like that.
That is pretty amazing. I would never think of that in a live scenario. Never.
Yeah, there's there are some little advantages. If people ever ask me, do you apply your maths degree? I'm like, yeah, of course I do.
Yeah.
I had this
trick
to solve a chess problem.
That's the difference between an accountant and a mathematician. Yeah.
Yeah, over here, disappointed in actuary.
Yeah, Brittany, you're supposed to have the best of both worlds there. I was going to say, super mathematical.
Did not come up with the fun mathematical tricks, but I don't know, maybe it'll come up again. We'll see. Yeah, mine was definitely a little bit more manual than this, but I agree, like treating it as 3 separate problems is definitely the way that you had to take this, like, at least looking at it after the fact. I built off of each one, so it's like maybe semi-similar, like I built off the first one, then built the second one, but it was a little bit more manual in setting up the template around and figure out which cells were, hittable.
Yep.
And then a bunch of indexes to just bring in the data that I cared in those cells that I cared about.
So something else I actually did was I went to the pieces, the pieces sheet, and I went find and replace by cell format, and I changed the gray blocks, and I made them all ones, and then I made them named ranges, and then I basically created an ifs formula to say if it's a king, bring back king moves, if it's a pawn, bring back pawn moves, etc. And then use those sort of arrays of ones and applied that to the board itself and brought back that sort of index, the index of that. But that only helped me for this level and didn't help me for any of the other levels. So it took me a lot of time to set up, and it wasn't as beneficial in the end.
I will just throw out one other way. I did not do it on this one, but one thing that you can do on grid problems is basically turn them from a 2-dimensional into a 1-dimensional. This is another trick that I picked up from Bo. If you look at either his Minesweeper video or his video on Joseph's maze problem from the Microsoft Excel World Championships, basically the idea is you kind of take pick one dimension, take the row number and multiply it by 1,000 or something that's kind of bigger than the number of rows or the number of columns. And then, so, take row number times 1,000 plus column number. That's kind of one single value that tells you exactly where you are in the grid. And it's relatively easy to go from a kind of row number and column number to that, or to go the other way around, kind of divide by 1,000 and take the int of it. And that's one of them, and mod 1,000, and that's the other one. But then, the nice thing about that is it's, if you want to say, what are all the places that a king can move to, then you can basically say, figure out the king's position, and then, you just kind of need a 1, 0, -1 and a 1, 0, -1. Then you can just kind of say, whatever, let's say the king is in position 5, then you can say king plus that is the list of all the places that the king can get to. By moving up or down or left or right. And equally, you could say, these should be plus and minus 1,000 rather than plus and minus 1. But those would be the corresponding places. And because the 1,000 is bigger than what's on the board, you don't run into kind of wrapping into the previous row or column. And so, if you have that set up, then you could say, well, a pawn will be just this plus whatever, -1 row would be kind of -999 and 1001 or something like that would be the two places that the pawn could move to. And again, because you have it set up that way that you then kind of look up that into the board, you don't have to worry about moving off the board, because you just allow for, if you're off, like when you do the lookup, just have an otherwise 0 condition or something like that. So, and again, for the knight, you could kind of lay out 8 rows of, -2, 1, -2, -1, 2, 1, 2, -1, etc., like all the different permutations that the knight could move, turn that into a single kind of vector of, +2000, -1, etc. And then again, you could, quickly figure out, okay, from this starting position, you could get to these 8 positions and then just get the values from those. So I think that's the closest thing to a basis for a general solution to the 3 different pieces of this. But like I said, I didn't do it that way. But if you want to learn that trick, Bo has a couple of cool videos where he does it. Level 5 is a little bit different from 4 and 6. So I'll skip that for a second and come back to it. But so level 6 was basically the same question. What are the value of pieces you can attack, but with castles, bishops, and queens? And the variation here was, there's no blocking. So in other words, if a bishop is sitting here, it doesn't matter if there's a piece here, it can still threaten every piece on the diagonal in every direction. And so for the castle, this was basically the same as what we did up above. So like, if the row label is this, or the column label is that, or being done by plus, then you do that. The bishop, a little bit different. The way I did it was, so basically the idea is, as you move away from the bishop, any one of these squares, the number of rows away that it is from the bishop is equal to the number of columns away that it is. So the way I checked that was, I take, row label minus the row I'm in, column label as a number minus the column I'm in, take the absolute value of each of those differences. And if those are equal, then I'm in a place that the bishop can attack, and otherwise I'm not. And then I just say, if that's true, then give me board points, otherwise give me 0. And then once you have the bishop and the castle, the queen is just kind of mashing them all together. So if either you're on the same diagonal, meaning the absolute value of this difference equals the absolute value of this difference, or you're on the row, or you're on the column, then give me the board points, otherwise 0. And the nice thing about doing it this way, where you kind of add them all together, rather than kind of figuring out the value of the column, figuring out the value of the row, figuring out the value of this diagonal, is that you don't have to worry about multi-counting the square that it's on. So like I said, on this one, you could kind of take, like, there might be a piece in T23, but if there is, you take that as well. But so then if you sum the column and sum the row, you'd count that twice. And if you sum the column and sum the row and sum 2 diagonals, you'd count it 4 times, and you'd have to kind of adjust for that. But if you put them all together like this, then you don't need to worry about that.
That is a super elegant solution, I must say. And what's nice about the OR logic that you're applying there is because it can be a 2, it can actually have the value of 2, for instance. It'll still be true, but it'll still only return 1 value for that. So the sum of that if is exactly, it's a very elegant solution.
Funnily enough, I'm not sure how, and I don't think I commented when I tested on this, because maybe I didn't think about it, but I'm not sure what the thought process was for like the ordering of levels 4, 5, and 6. I actually found level 4 took me longer than levels 5 and 6 put together.
Wow.
But just because it was a lot more intricate, and these 3 kind of pieces were a lot more different from each other. Whereas here, like, at least once you had the castle and the bishop, you could just sort of put them together to get the queen. But yeah, the level 4 was a lot more fidgety for me. So level 5 was a sort of totally different thing. The idea was, you start off with your pawn somewhere at the bottom of the board, and it moves up the board. And so, if there's, let's say it starts here, for example, if there's nothing it can take, then it just moves forward exactly like a pawn moves. And then if it's able to take, it takes. And if there's multiple pieces it's able to take, there's different decision rules. So it's like first preference is to take the king. Then if you can't take a king, then the second preference is to go by highest points. And if that leaves you with a tiebreaker, then you take to the left. So here, for example, knight is 3 points, castle is 5 points, so you take the castle. There's nothing here, but there's a knight here, so you take that, take that, take that. I'm trying to find another tiebreaker case, but anyway. And the other thing it mentioned was if you're in a situation, I can't immediately, let's say No, can't see one here. Anyway, if you're in a situation where you can only move forward, there's nothing to take, but there's a piece in the way, then you just ignore that and you move forward. You don't take the piece, but you just kind of move through it like a ghost. So the way I set that up, this is one that I did with a data table. So I put in a picker, and then I XLOOKUP that in here. So I did the same thing here, splitting out, row number, column label, column number. So I looked that up, and then I set up grid here. Move over so it's not behind our faces. So you start off in row 99 and column 92, and then you figure out what are your two targets, much like the kind of pawn move before. So if you're in column 1, then you can't take left. If you're in column 100, then you can't take right. But otherwise, we just use index, one row higher and one column left or right to find out these are the two possible targets. These are the values of those two targets. And I said, if it's a king, then 1,000. Otherwise, get the value the usual way. Then you take the max of those. And then here I just said, if the max of those is 0, meaning there's no piece that you can take in either direction, then our kind of column offset is 0, meaning go straight ahead. Otherwise, if the right-hand side is greater, then +1 to go right, otherwise -1 to go left. And the significance of the greater here is that implicitly captures the if there's a tie, go left. So in other words, you only go to the right if the value on the right is greater. If the left is greater than or equal, then you go left. And so that gives you the column offset for the next one. And then, you basically repeat. So the next row, you always move one row up the board. So you subtract 1, and then you take the offset from the previous one. And then again, you extract the targets, you extract the values, take the max, you figure out the offset, and you kind of walk your way all the way down the board. So you can see there's kind of a few thousands in there that correspond to kings. And then to extract the value of pieces taken, you always take the max. So I just did a SUMIF where that's less than 100. And that's just a way to exclude the kings, because you want to take the kings, they're the first priority, but you don't actually get any points for it. And the question was, how many points do you get? And then I just did a data table for that to figure out the answers for each of those.
That's awesome.
So that's level 5. And then the real fun of this question, in my humble opinion, was in the bonuses, somewhat bonuses 1 and 2, but definitely especially bonus 3. So let me just talk quickly about those. First of all, bonus 1 and 2, there's one cell on the board where a pawn can attack 2 queens, and there's one cell on the board that's not occupied, an important caveat, where a knight can attack 4 queens simultaneously. You have to find that cell. So the way I did it for the first one, it's a little large, but it's not as crazy as it might look. So the idea is basically we're doing make array. We're going to make a 100 by 100 array, in other words, the size of the board. And in each location, we're going to say, if this is a location where you can take a queen this way and take a queen that way, then give me the location of that, which is, the column label and the row label corresponding to that row and column. Otherwise, give me a blank, and then I'm just going to concatenate that entire array because we're told there's only one answer. So that'll just return, in this case, AW14 is the one answer. And so what does that function look like in the middle? Well, if the row is 1 or the column is 1 or the column is 100, then there's nothing you can take, because you're either at the top of the board and you can't take up, or you're at the side and you won't be able to take. You need to be able to take 2 queens, so you need to be able to take from both positions. And the nice thing about make array is, this is, I'm saying what function do I apply to the row and the column that range from 1 to 100 each. I don't have to worry about using or here, because I'm only applying it to one row and one column at a time. So that kind of simplifies this. So if any of those things happen, then blank. And then the next thing I say is, if the next row up and column to the left is a queen, and the next row up and column to the right is a queen, and that space, that row and column, is empty, then give me this, the kind of address of that cell. Otherwise, give me blank. And then you just mash all those together, and that is your answer. Now you could. Obviously, you might find it easier to kind of, rather than using make array and kind of smashing that all into place, you could basically kind of lay out, a 100 by 100 array here, and just work with it that way if you're more comfortable with that. But you know, the beauty of dynamic arrays is that you don't need to do a lot of spreading out unless you're interested in the interim calculations, which in this case we're not. Having said that, I for some reason, I'm not 100% sure why. I guess maybe because I was being a little purist about it, but for the night piece, I did basically lay out 100 by 100 grid. I think it was because I was worried about managing the edge cases. So, you know, with the pawn, you know, the pawn can only attack 2 pieces. And so for it to be able to attack 2 queens, you know that it can't be at the edge of the board here or the edge of the board here or the top of the board here. The knight's a little bit different. The knight in theory could be at the edge of the board and be able to attack, you know, these 4 squares. So you'd feel kind of 99% confident if you only searched, you know, not the first 2 columns, not the last 2 columns, not the first 2 rows, not the last 2 rows, that you were going to get it. But in theory, you could miss it by doing that. And so I kind of laid it out with this formula. I just said, you know, if error. So just this kind of pointing to the 8 cells around it in board points. I wrapped. So I said, if this is 9, if this is 9, if this is 9, and again, these are, you know, this becomes either true or false, which is 1 or 0. You add them together, you get, you know, the total number of queens that it can take. And the reason I wrapped them all in an if error was so that I could copy it over here, even though, you know, now it's trying to point to cells that are off the grid, and it broke. Nice. So that was how I handled the kind of edge cases. Although in practice you didn't really need to. So then I just said concat if, you know, this range is greater than or equal to 4, then give me column label and row label, otherwise give me 0. But I did look at it again later, and let's see, I did it this way. So this is kind of the make array version. So I just said, if, you know, the row is less than 3, or the column is less than 3, or the row is greater than 98, or the column is greater than 98, then give me, you know, look, I basically just kind of made each of these blocks and then copy pasted and changed the signs of the, you know, -1, -2, -1 + 2, +1 -2, and so on for the 8 different possible ways it could go. And that gives you the right answer. Or you can be a little bit more elegant and lay out the possible knight moves in, you know, in cells here. And then you can just say, you know, index board R plus, you know, row plus your row shift, column plus your column shift. If that's equal to queen, you know, put a minus in front of that to turn it into 0s and 1s, sum them all up. And if that's greater than or equal to 4 and that area is empty, then same thing. Anyway, lots of ways to do that. But the really fun one was bonus 3. So this is like a new innovation. I thought it was a super cool idea. So, you know, the normal thing is, you know, have you got the answer right, or have you got the answer wrong? If you got the answer right, you get all the points. If you get the answer wrong, you get no points. And, you know, if it's a bonus question, then only the first person gets it. The cool thing about this one was, I still don't know the right answer. I've maybe got a little closer to it, but the question was basically place a full set of chess pieces, so 1 king, 1 queen, 2 castles, 2 knights, 2 bishops, and 8 pawns, somewhere on the board to maximize the value of pieces that you could attack. So obviously the queens, castles, and bishops that can, you know, shoot off as far as they want in any direction are your kind of real high value add ones there. The king, knight, and pawn, not so much. But, you know, like to find the perfect way to place these would be like a hugely complex, you know, computer programming problem, or not necessarily hugely complex, but it would be, you know, borderline infinitely time consuming, because there are, you know, squillions of possible ways you could place the pieces, and coming up with, you know, a way to even search that space in a tractable amount of time would be a very difficult computer science problem. But the cool thing about this is you don't have to get the best possible configuration. You just have to get a better configuration than your opponent. And so the question was, you know, what kind of heuristics, what simplifications can you come up with in the time? So when I was testing this, I think I got to this question with like 8 minutes or so. So I didn't have a ton of time, but I had, you know, enough time to play around with it a bit. So the first thing I did was just look at, okay, which, you know, let's look at the row sums, you know, just kind of summing across the row of points here. And let's look at the column sums. here. And let's just look, which row would let you capture the most, which column would let you capture the most. And I basically said, okay, so 13 is the highest value row, CM is the highest value column, so I'm going to place my queen in CM 13. Now that doesn't allow for, that's not the most valuable place you can place the queen because it doesn't think about the diagonals, but whatever, I was in a rush. And then, I put my king in AU 81, and my castle, and my other castle in AI 61. And then I started setting up something to basically work on the diagonals. So, I had a sequence of all the kind of potential differences between your row and column number from -99 to 99, and kind of summed the value of each of those, and all the different possible sums of your row and column number. So basically corresponding to kind of positive and negative diagonal, and the kind of values of each of those. And I had sorted those, and I was starting to try to put those together. And then what I realized was, because your diagonals are either white or black, the intersection of the highest value positive diagonal and the highest value negative diagonal might not exist. And in fact, it didn't, because the highest value difference was highest value sum was odd and the highest value difference was even. So like they're different colors. So you couldn't find the intersection of those. And at that point I realized, okay, I've got like a minute left and I haven't placed most of my pieces. So I think I just said, these both seem to be kind of pretty close to the middle. So I'll just go ahead and place my bishops, somewhere in the middle of the board. And then I just place my king and my knights and my pawns literally completely at random. So I ended up getting to like 1575 with that. I played around with it later with like a slightly smarter optimizing of the queen and looking at basically splitting these into the ones that are on black and white squares so that I could combine them into good places for the bishop. So I managed to get a score into the kind of mid 1900s, I think like 1961. I'm sure that's still not the best, but that's as far as I got. Let me just see if I can find. I do have one where I think this is the one where I had kind of done a little bit more of the workings. Where
Sorry, I was wondering. I was wondering if you could use a goal seek for a problem like this. I was thinking about how you could use
solver.
solver, yeah.
I don't know how smart solver would be about a problem like this. In other words, I don't know if solver could, like, I think you'd probably have to solver one piece at a time, kind of going from your highest value down. Don't know. I did kind of think about it, and then I thought this feels too hard for solver. But maybe. But so just to kind of show you quickly, when I kind of said, oh yeah, so there's the 1961 that I got to. So when I set this up later, sorry, I'm just gonna shrink you guys down here because you're. So there's basically you can see here there's a sort of version of the board with all the pieces that can be attacked shaded in, and related to that, I set something up where basically I checked if any piece could be attacked. I zeroed out its points so that I could kind of optimize the placement of the new pieces among what was left. So the kind of queen, king, bishop optimization looked pretty similar. I did figure out a way to optimize kind of pawn, king, and knight placement, which is basically all with formulas something like this. So this is basically the addresses. So like the column labels concatenated with the row labels, turn that into a column, and then turn the kind of value that you can capture by moving from here. So I don't know how easy it is to see this, but there are basically 3 different arrays here corresponding to kind of where the pawn is, where it captures by moving this way, and where it captures by moving that way. So if you add the 3 of those together, you get the value of each square, and then you kind of to-call that as well, and then you sort the list of addresses by the points you can get descending, and then it just said take the first 5 of those. So these are like the 5 best squares to place a pawn given the things that have already been placed. And similar way, these are the best places to place a king. Here I used a map to say, basically this is the kind of sum offset thing. So, for each square, figure out the value of the squares around it. And then again, kind of to call the addresses and sort by. And then knight, this is kind of a more manual one. Again, there's like 9 different arrays here corresponding to where the knight is in each of the 8 positions that it can take from there. But at the end of the day, optimizing the kind of pawns, kings, and knights is the relatively low value piece, because if you, even with my kind of optimized board, if I take all of those away, I'm probably still, you're still in like almost 1700 out of 1961 comes from the handful of pieces that can attack the whole way to the end of the board. So anyway, that's as far as I've got. I'm very curious to hear if anyone figures out a way to get further along than that.
What is the value of all the pieces? Did you check that?
I did not, in fact, check all the value of all the pieces, but I guess I can just sum board points. It's 11,000. So there's lots of room.
Wow.
I mean, you can see that, you can sort of see on the shaded board, like you're covering a pretty small portion of the real estate, even when you've kind of placed those down, because there's only 3 full columns that you can attack, 3 full rows that you can attack, and 3 full diagonals in each direction that you can attack. So there's, compared to 100 rows and 100 columns, there's a lot of empty real estate there.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah. Well, yeah, I think we've reached the end of the problems and the end of the Microsoft Excel World Championship. It's been a crazy competition. It's been really entertaining, and I like this format. I love this format of gameplay, and I just love everything about the challenge. I wish more people could actually be introduced to it, and I wish more people can actually participate so that we can find more Brittany Deatons out there. Brittany had to leave to finish out a couple of things for the day, but yeah, it was crazy to see her get so close to actually beating Andrew in the semifinals, and yeah, well done to Andrew for taking it again. That's
back
now
to
2
back.
years in a row.
It's even with a near scrape along the way, that's still very impressive.
and with like 2 4 a.m. starts. I think it was 4 a.m. starts for him, so it's insane. I would not be able to do that. I don't know if he has children, but yeah, some of us are practiced in waking up at weird times of the day, but it's just crazy.
Did Andrew win the last model off as well?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So is he back to back on the one-off championships by the sounds of it to me?
On the what?
No, I mean so we've got the regular season of FNWC, which is more like a season competition. But
the battles.
Yeah, I guess you could. I mean, like you could kind of say he's back to back because he also won the All-Star battle that we had earlier in the year. He's pretty hard to beat in this format. But I'm still going to try again next year.
And what's crazy to me is I always try and think of like how does he prepare? Because I think after the quarterfinals, he said that he didn't know about the find and replace by cell color or by format. And that's crazy. Like he didn't know about it, but I don't know if he Googled in the competition, but I mean it's just crazy. It's crazy that he just nails every single problem that gets thrown at him. But yeah, thanks guys for joining us, and thanks Gabriela as well for joining us. It was nice having you on the live broadcast, and having someone with your stature in the Women in Financial Modeling competition, as well as with your level of experience. It was nice. It was nice having you join us, and we have. I'm also ex-PwC, so we have a lot of PwC or ex-PwC people on the call as well. So it was nice having a good representation. Thanks, Dim, or as always for your expertise and your time and just sharing with us. It's
thanks for having me. It's always enjoyable.
Always great learning from you, and thanks Jason, throughout the load shedding and everything late night. Thanks for joining me on the live stream every time. It's been great, and hopefully we can do more of this in the future.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Renier, and good luck to everyone who's taking part in the regular competition this weekend.
Yeah, Dim, you said you did your round just now before the live stream.
Yes, I did. It wasn't a big success. I mean, it's sort of low stakes for me because I already can't catch Lawrence, and Andrew and Michael can't catch me, so I'm going to finish in the same place in the season anyway. But I was feeling psyched about it. I did the similar one from last year that they mentioned, and that went pretty smoothly. And I thought, all right, I'm going to smash this. I'm going to finish on a high note. I definitely did not.
Yeah. You can't win all of them, but that would make you second overall, right?
Yep. I will be number 2, which that's pretty good going.
And Andrew will be number 1, but yeah, that would not be back to back.
Lawrence
you won.
Lawrence,
sorry.
Yeah, and Andrew and Michael are still. That's one of the things that could still change. Andrew and Michael are battling it out for number 3. I think Andrew's got the lead, but he, like he does not love the kind of hardcore traditional financial modeling questions. So there's a window for Michael to catch him there.
Okay, great. But thanks for everyone on the live stream. It was nice seeing Bo joined us until the end, and he shared a lot of crazy formulas and a lot of crazy solutions. So I'm definitely going to check the live feed again afterwards. But yeah, thanks for everyone who joined us on the live feed, and I know that a lot of people actually watch this afterwards, and thanks for joining us, and yeah, leave your comments and your thoughts, and hopefully we'll see you again soon when we have more battles or more FMWCs. I think I'll definitely be joining the big competition from next year as well, so it should be fun.
And a last minute challenge to everyone to post your bonus 3 of the chess score in the comments. See who can get the highest one.
Yes, and if you have a higher solution, please share that with us. I'd like to actually know how you attempted it and how you built it. So great. Have a good rest of the day and rest of the evening to all of you, and thanks again for joining.
Take care.
Yeah.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.